Okay, welcome everyone to our SSDN webinar today on getting buy-in for digital library projects. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be made available on our YouTube channel later this week. We have also enabled closed captioning. To turn this on or off, please click on the CC Live Transcript button at the bottom of your Zoom window. The live transcription may contain errors as it is automated. Your mics are muted, but you can feel free to ask questions in the chat box during and after the presentations. Unfortunately, Alvin Lee could not join us today due to an emergency, but we will incorporate his portion of this webinar on gaining buy-in from users into a future webinar, so stay tuned for that. And without further ado, I'll introduce our presenters for today. We have Lee Dotson, who is the Digital Initiatives Librarian and Interim Department Head for Technology Solutions and Digital Initiatives at the John C. Hitt Library. She is the manager of STARS, UCF's Digital Institutional Repository, and has the opportunity to work with digital projects and repositories at UCF since the libraries began digitization efforts in 1999. And then we have Melissa Mines VandeBurgt. She is currently an associate director at the Bradshaw Library of Florida Gulf Coast University and leads the university archives and special collections in all things digital. And I will pass it on to Mel.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Kayla and Jamie, for organizing this webinar. I'm going to turn off my camera only because it serves as a distraction for myself. If I can figure out how to do so. There we go. The topic was something that was very interesting to reflect upon. So I thank you again. So I thought what we could do is use Florida Gulf Coast University Library as a case study in how to build a robust digital initiatives program from scratch. In 2012, we had no established infrastructure, no hardware, no software, no repository. Fun fact, Islandora was selected as Florida's shared digital library platform on March 5th, 2012, which happened to be my first day on the job. To make things more challenging, FGCU did not have an established university archives or special collections. Oh, and one more thing, I did not have a staff. It was just me. Now in 2021, FGCU has 20,000 assets actively used by scholars, students, novelists, and publications across the country. We have contributed more than 2,300 assets to SSDN and DPLA. And our university archives and special collections welcomes an average of 1,500 visitors per year. How did we do it? This is the most important question you can ask yourself. If you don't believe it, you cannot sell it. And make no mistake, your success is dependent on your and your team's ability to sell it. Where's your digital program now? Where do you see it in the future? What can it become if it's invested in? What can it become if it is invested in? That vision, that thing you and your team aspire to, it will also be what inspires others to buy in and invest in your program. I use these statements all the time. We know this historic record will allow our faculty and students to repair and preserve the fragile water and environmental ecology of Southwest Florida. They are your collections. We are humbled to be their caretakers. They sound pretty cheesy, right? But I believe them to be true, so I can say them with conviction and I can say them with honesty. That is what people connect with. Other things to note, the use of the words we, our, your, collective words that speak to collaboration, a shared experience, not ownership. Also note there is no technical jargon. No one wants to feel as though they need a translator or a library degree to understand what you're talking about. Make it easy for them to buy in, make it easy for them to get on board. So what resources do you have available? Think beyond your department, think beyond your library. Think of it more like grassroots organizing. Share your goals, remember your why. You know those cheesy truth statements, AKA elevator talks or elevator speeches? Share those with anyone and everyone that will listen to you. You will be surprised where resources come from. I once mentioned in my desire to digitize these oral histories, and they happen to be on cassettes, like old audio cassettes. And I was just mentioning the fact that I really wanted to know what was on them, but that I didn't have an audio cassette player. This is years ago. The next day when I came to work, there was one sitting on my desk. A person in a meeting had heard me talking about it, had one in their closet. They hadn't touched it in years, obviously, and they were thrilled to get rid of it. We still use it to this day. So still today, my department only has 2 full-time staff. Everything we've accomplished, everything the department has been made possible by the most important of resources, our human ones. I realized early on in my career that I may not have the money for full-time staff, ever. I've accepted this, but that I can teach. By collaborating with other departments across campus, we have offered, and this is a soft number because I hate math, about 8,000 internship hours, 1,000 service learning hours, and employed dozens of both undergraduate and graduate students. They have been and remain the lifeblood of our department. So think about 135 hours equals 3 credit hours. Their tuition is paying for those credit hours. FGCU happens to require 80 hours of service learning to graduate. So see what programs are available at your institution. And if you're not affiliated with a college or a university, check out a college or university nearby, because if they have service learning, you can apply for them and they're free. Research, scholarship, curation, radio and press junkets, digitization, metadata, ingest, and peer-to-peer teaching. Many interns stay on as archival assistants through graduation and walk away with all of these skills. And starting in the fall, we'll be partnering with the English department to take on graduate assistants, paid for by the College of Arts and Sciences, not the library. So again, it's not hitting my budget. Opportunities to share resources, get volunteers, interns, attending trainings, participating in workshops are abundant. Reach out. Think outside your institution. Think outside the library. So it's time to make lists. This is my favorite thing. I love a Post-it note. What do you have? What formats do you have that need to be digitized? What equipment is required to convert them from their lowly analog world? What do those machines cost? Who can you collaborate with? And who wants the same thing you do? And yes, seriously, make lists and see where the overlap is. I'm not suggesting Venn diagrams, but having a list of what is needed and who is a potential or current partner in one place will provide opportunity after opportunity for collaboration and sharing of resources. So hardware, in my opinion, is easier to acquire. Software is expensive and it has to be renewed. So when it's not a one-time cost, it's a much harder sell. At FGCU, all licenses have to go through IT. And fortunately, the library administration has always supported any software requests. But there may be others participating that have other avenues or suggestions regarding sourcing software in creative ways. Please feel free to share in the chat and or share during the Q&A at the end. All knowledge is welcome. So we're just going to remove software from the equation. You'd be surprised at what's on campus. Many faculty acquire grants that include hardware such as scanners, cameras, video, light boxes ad infinitum. They complete the project and the hardware sits in their office or in storage. Talk with people in your community, other departments, colleges, historical societies, local museums, and ask about what resources they have, including hardware. And don't forget to share your why. Cross-reference your list with your list of hardware needs. I promise that taking the time to have that list prepared ahead of time is priceless, because you will know when to pull the trigger when it's time. You'll know when to make the ask if you have the list and you know what you want. So now you're not only assessing what you have, but creating a collection of possible shared resources. And the machines, they're sad in the closet. They want to fulfill their digitization destinies. Another note, if faculty want to contribute something like 2,000, sometimes 10,000 35mm slides to the repository, and you don't have an automated slide scanner, ask for the cost of the hardware to be covered by the other department. You're sharing resources. They purchase the hardware, you provide the time and expertise to digitize it and make it discoverable. Another important partner in acquiring the necessary hardware is archives and special collections. For many digital initiatives program, a large chunk of the collections we digitize are from archives and special collections. Regular meetings about future acquisitions are important. For example, Specs was in the middle of a large acquisition in 2020, 300 linear feet of environmental ecology documents, maps, and large format photographs. The donor was very excited about the collection being digitally accessible sometime in the future. I was able to negotiate 2 large format scanners to accompany the acquisition. That was an additional $18,000 added to the acquisition, plus we got the 2 large format scanners. So much of getting buy-in is simply having a seat at the table where discussions are being made and advocating for your department's needs. So this is a touchy subject. One of the things that I think is difficult with libraries is that historically we see ourselves as a service culture. We're hardwired to meet our patrons' needs. But I believe that with digitization, it's more of a partnership model than a service model. We had a faculty member who desperately wanted a handful of 16 mil film from one of our special collections digitized. He asked me about it repeatedly, and each time I gave the same response. We would love to digitize the film. It must be outsourced, and due to the condition of the film, it will be pricey. I am happy to make the arrangements, pack it up, ship it, and add the content to the repository if your department will pay for the outsourcing. He didn't like my response anytime that I gave it. So he went to his dean, then he went to my dean, but ultimately a year later, his college put up the $4,000 to have the films digitized. Partnership model, not service model. Scale up and demonstrate value and impact along the way. What does this even mean? Let me give you an example. So in 2014, I saw the Bookeye rare book scanner at a conference, Dangerous Places for Librarians with a Beer Budget and Champagne Taste. I wanted it. I wanted it. I really, really, really wanted it. High ticket items are a hard sell for an administration. You must demonstrate value added and impact before asking. Because we creatively sought hardware and equipment from other sources in the past, it was easier to convince library administration that because they had seen value already placed by building an institutional repository. One of the most effective ways in which the department has demonstrated added value to the library and the Southwest Florida community has been through our exhibitions. The exhibitions not only highlight our special collections and their corresponding collections within the repository, but they also allow the opportunity to show what we could do if we had a particular piece of equipment. So in fall 2014, I curated an exhibition on our rare book collection. Yep, I was still focused on the Bookeye. The collection is valued about 1.2 million. It's exquisite. We invited advancement, university donors, as well as the original donor's family to a private reception. Well, the family did not donate the $75,000 for the scanner, but I continued to put the scanner on the wants and needs list every year. Finally, after we got the Bookeye in 2017, we were able to demonstrate impact by partnering with 2 classes, creative writing and typography. Both classes came in and drew inspiration from the rare book collection. The creative writing students provided poetry to the typography students, who then turned their words into various creative 2- and 3-dimensional works, which we highlighted alongside scans taken with the Bookeye from the rare books that inspired them. We were able to show tangible impact on students and showcase student works. Our donors loved it. Relationships are everything, both in life and in work, by the way. What do you have to offer? What do you need? Where is the overlap? You just have to step outside your comfort zone and step outside your own office to develop partnerships. You got this. I look forward to answering your questions, and my contact information is there if you'd like to reach out privately.
Thank you, Mel. That blends beautifully into my discussion about the power of partnerships. I will say that partnerships can be anywhere. Go back one. There we go. The most important thing to keep in mind is that your partnerships can be local. They can be within your library. They can be on your campus. They can be your community partners, but don't forget your statewide and even your national worldwide partners. There have been many times that I have felt that I speak to and work closer on projects with my partners across the state and my friends at FIU and FGCU and FSU and UNF and UF and everyone else, because we're doing very similar work. And so sometimes having those partners in those locations who are using the same systems you are, or dealing with some of the same questions you are, is a great thing. So building that trust, being able to have that cooperation and communicate with them is so, so important. But the one thing I also wanted to touch on in partnerships is managing expectations, because a lot of times we enter into partnerships with a lot of hope and excitement, but what we really need to do, and Mel touched on this as well, is make sure that everyone understands just what we can do and what we can't do, and how much of that work can be done, and who needs to pay for it. So definitely managing those expectations up front is crucial to good, strong partnerships. So for digital collections buy-in, Mel talked about most of these things. So I just wanted to say we have dealt with a lot of the same issues for getting buy-in for software, which is tricky, equipment, funding, staffing, and support. I don't care if you've been doing this 20 months or 20 years, the money does not come raining down at some magical point. So we're always dealing with those things, and we're always continuing to get the buy-in for those items. But the one thing too, at UCF, we are not part of the special collections or university archives. Our digital initiatives is separate. It's historically been part of our library IT. Right now it's part of our library technology solutions and digital initiatives department. So we don't have any materials of our own. We digitize and we provide the services and support for those things, but they're not our materials. So we really have to have good, strong buy-in from the other departments in our library who we're partnering with to get those materials online, as well as campus and other partners. A really great example of this is one of our very first collections, Central Florida Memory, which was started as a partnership. So a good, strong partnership. We started with 3 institutions, grew it to 9, and really learned a lot about library partners, academic library partners, and museum partners. So the one thing about that is we all viewed our materials differently, and in some cases, museums have a very different expectation for when they put their materials online. Normally, they do not put a lot online because they are driving traffic into their museum. So they're very careful about what they put online. So a lot of what we did with our Orange County Regional History Center was building a strong relationship behind that partnership. And they had great maps and correspondence and postcards. And so we talked a lot about what our processes were and what our safety measures were. But what it came down to was the only way we could really get the level of trust that we needed for them to loan us materials to digitize, to put online, was to actually have someone come and spend the day with us. So don't be afraid to ask people what they need in order to make the partnership successful. It was not something that we had ever thought to invite someone to come and sit with us, but they said, that's really, we would like to see you in action. So that's what we did. We invited them, and they came, and they had one of their people stay the entire day and sat and watched us digitize different items, and could see how we cared for them. And that really was what cemented that partnership with them. So what I'm going to spend the most of my time talking about is institutional repository buy-in. And I know we're talking about digital collections, so just go with me for a minute here. At UCF, we cast a very wide net for our institutional repository. So I'm kind of bleeding the lines there for us a little bit in understanding the amount of buy-in, whether it's a small digital project or a larger, university-wide digital repository. So we cast, like I said, a very wide net. So we put in anything by, for, or about UCF. So some of that is typical digital collections items like our student newspapers, oral histories, our yearbooks, all those sorts of things, our university photograph collection. So really, we look at both sides of that when we look at the buy-in for our institutional repository. Like Mel said, for her situation, it also was a grassroots effort. We had to provide a proof of concept so that we could get good, strong buy-in for the funding. We rely a lot on cross-departmental support. So even though, we're all one family at the library, everybody's busy doing their own thing. So, in order to get support from cataloging and from archives and our subject librarians, we needed their buy-in as well, including our campus outreach. A campus-wide repository is nothing if you don't have the buy-in from across your campus. So that was very important to reach out, not only to our faculty and our students, but also to the different administrative units on campus as well. And like I said before, we rely a lot on statewide expertise. So people who are doing similar projects to yours or using similar software or systems or even equipment, definitely relying on their expertise and understanding where they come from for that too is very important. So that depending on the size of your project, buy-in always takes time. Like Mel said, she laid that groundwork a long time to get her nice fancy scanner. So you're not going to go from 0 to 60 overnight. You have to really think about the long game. So what we did is even before 2011, several of us librarians have been talking about a campus-wide digital repository, and there had been 2 or 3 of us at a time talking about these things. And so that was okay, and we started some chatter, but really when we started to look at things with a broader look at buy-in was our scholarly communication task force. And that task force took about a year, and we did a lot of environmental scans and research and surveys, and we put out a report. And this was from folks across the library, from our research and information services, from cataloging, from our discovery librarian, one of our regional campus librarians. So we really tried to get some good cross-library support. This report was 53 pages, which was not super helpful for everybody. So when we presented that, at that time, we were asked to create a mental model. So we could not figure out what that meant. We went back to the drawing board and we created the research life cycle at UCF. And the dots on all of these represent either existing services or unmet needs across campus. So anything that was gray at this time was an unmet need. And it just walked through the life cycle and explained where in the process researchers could get assistance with each portion of their research, of the planning cycle, the project cycle, publication. The one that really had the most grade was that 21st Century Digital Scholarship Cycle, which was our repository and preservation. So, and we worked with partners across campus on this as well. So we had buy-in for this from our High Performance Computing Center to our Office of Research, our Faculty Center for Teaching and Learning. So we really tried to engage people throughout the entire process. And that really kicked off a strong partnership with our Office of Research and Commercialization. We weren't really doing a repository at that time, but working with them on this and doing presentations for them, just laying that groundwork for a good, strong partnership. then the opportunity came up to apply for tech fee funding for the institutional repository. And so that's what we did with this information and the connections that we had built and getting buy-in across campus. We went ahead and put in for tech fee funding for the institutional repository. We launched STARS in mid 2015 and started accepting content that August, which was really exciting. We started with some very easy content that we could go ahead and put in there, existing collections that were waiting to go in. At that time, we're also migrating our library website to WordPress, and we could not take a lot of the PDFs and extra files that were on our previous website into WordPress. So we put those into the repository, and we found a lot of uses for things that needed to get done, and started with that so that we could build some strong examples and people could see what it would look like when we started talking to them about it. Also, as we were getting started, we got contacted from a faculty member who had a podcast series that he was wanting to put in. He was just happenstance looking for something at that time. I was very thankful we were able to say yes and get started, and he's been a great partner throughout and provides a lot of feedback for us and new projects, which is fantastic. So that has been a good, strong partnership in that respect. My goal with doing the digital repository was to be able to say yes more than I said no, because for years when we would have our faculty from across campus come to us with digital projects, we had to say no because we did not have the storage and the bandwidth to take care of those things and to help them administer them. So now I was able to start saying yes, which was really exciting. So we started with those library website files and our existing collections. And then in 2018, we hit a pretty big milestone, which was our 1 million downloads. So we really were very thankful for all the partners that we had gotten from across campus and people who had started really to believe in this concept with us. And so we thought the best way to continue that buy-in was to celebrate the buy-in. So we threw a party, a You're 1 in a Million party, and invited anyone who had contributed to the repository, provided content for us, or just gave us envelopes of their content for us to digitize and put in on their behalf. And we had a nice little presentation and some food, and it was really very nice to see people come out and talk to them, and they were able to share their stories of, how it had really impacted them. I had one faculty member who early on was very willing to give me some of her content, but when she came to the million party, she was very honest, and she said, I had no idea what you were doing. I did not know, where this was going. I just knew that you were going to, scan my stuff and make it available. But she said, I just didn't realize what that meant in the long run. And her content is very well downloaded. It's really some great stuff. And so she was able to, with the proof of concept, really see the value of that, give us that feedback there. And she actually showed up at the party with another envelope of material. So great, great to keep that buy-in going. So our tech fee funding ended about 2018, 2019. So really, we very strongly continue to build relationships, and we focus on additional support for all of our colleges, our theses and dissertations, journals, events, anything that anybody brings to us. We love interesting projects. So we will work with them to see if it's a good fit or if we can help them find another platform or something else that might work better for them. We know not everything is going to come to us, but we do try to provide some mediation there if it isn't going to work, to make sure that they find the support that they need for that. And we want to continue that funding. So the interesting thing was, we went to 2020, we had to quickly transition to remote projects, of course, due to COVID. So we were able to be at work one day and the next day be at home and work on cleanup and migration projects, thanks to having our digital institutional repository. So that made our department, when others were trying to find projects and find other things to do, we were up and running in no time. And so that really showed great value in having all of this online, and not just having the content online, but the ability for us to be able to work on it from anywhere. So from a perspective that we had not really thought about as a value add before, that because it had never been an option, it quickly became apparent that that was the case. So we did get some increased faculty interest for remote access to their research and projects due to them all being remote and them having researchers in other areas looking for some of their content. A great example is one of our archaeology professors. He had an image database that was created in an old website platform that was no longer accessible. So we did some Zoom sessions, and we, brought up some examples for him, and we're able to take his old database files and put them into the repository and give him a way to share these images again. And we were really happy. They're not the most high resolution images, but it's what he had and it's what he needed to share. And so it really solved that need for him at that time to be able to go ahead and make those available. He works with a lot of researchers in Bolivia, so not being able to travel, this really solved a huge need for him last summer. So then moving forward, what we are continuing to do is balance the digital collections, the scanning request, and our institutional repository. So not everything takes the same amount of time. We sometimes are inundated with projects. Sometimes we, have a little bit of a dry spell. So we try to have some, things behind the scenes that always can get done, but maintaining that buy-in for all aspects of the work that goes into the final product being online is really very important. So then we need to look at our outcomes, because, just like Mel said, when you get to the end, if you want people to continue buying in, they have to see what it's all about. So for our outcomes, typically we look at our statistics. So we have over 111,000 works posted. We've had 4.5 million downloads, 1.2 million metadata pages hits. But what does that all really mean? So we love having our pretty map and being able to show where our works are being used across around the world. But we know that numbers are just one piece of it, and places are just one piece of it. So we know there are some things that we are missing, and I'd like to figure out how to capture some of those more qualitative items. So measuring for return, we're really interested in our stakeholders. So when you're doing partnerships and buy-in, you have active stakeholders. So sometimes it's the number of stakeholders, sometimes it's their level of satisfaction, which isn't as easy a thing to measure, but we really need to have that strong investment in our stakeholders, because if they're investing in us and buying in us, whether it's trust or cooperation or funding, we really need to make sure that we are somehow measuring that relationship. The number of collections created, we go back to the number, but not just the number of collections created, but the type of collections created. Are we taking content from a professor's office who's retiring and giving it a new life, where it was sitting in an old listserv or in his desk drawer, and now we've made them all available online? Are we taking that old website that is no longer accessible and giving it a new life? So the type of collections and what the value is in that. The level of satisfaction across the board. I mentioned before the transition to remote. So that's nothing I ever would have put on a list before, but just how flexible you can be. So sometimes that flexibility, whether you're in your building or you are remote, is a key that I had not considered prior to this year. And then we are always looking for additional statistics, analytics, metrics. We have some great metrics built into our system, but we also rely on Google Analytics for some of the content as well. We have some open education collections where they're linking out, so we don't get the download counts. So we rely on Google Analytics for that. So we try to find the best ways to give that information back to our partners and many cases, that's a faculty member who might be needing to use that information for their tenure promotion packet, so, or their annual review. So that's something that we are, very, very on top of, to make sure that they can have access to that, so that they can continue to use the repository. So you can always email me, lee.dotson@ucf.edu. The easy one is stars@ucf.edu, and that's monitored by several of us. If you ever have any questions, just let us know.
Do you have a comment in the chat?
You're really quiet again, Kayla.
Is this any better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So we do have a comment in the chat. With hardware, when I was at the law library, we went through the phase out of Windows XP. We had a microfilm scanner, which was required for law school accreditation because the accreditation requirements were a bit old, and had microfilm written in as a hard and fast requirement. The microfilm scanner was as old as the accreditation requirements and the driver that would run on Windows XP, but nothing newer. And the newer microfilm scanners were 5 figures to buy. Even the old microfilm scanners, like what we had, were a couple of $1,000s. Lots of meetings on campus let us keep one Windows XP machine, provided that it was never allowed to connect to the internet. The hardware has the drivers, but yes, software needs more attention regularly and a drip of cash. So that is a very valid comment.
Right.
And I think it's a common problem when it comes to outdated media in particular. So I know that some libraries have invested in expensive equipment like Fred machines. Fred machines are forensic machines that law enforcement generally uses for outdated media, and they can be very expensive, and not everyone has the ability to add things like that. So it's good to know who has connections and can potentially get you access to things like that. So if anyone has any questions for our presenters, please feel free to add those into the chat. I definitely learned a lot today. One of the things that I wanted to ask both of you mentioned events in your presentations and the importance of those events to get buy-in. So as someone who plans events a lot, I know that those require a lot of time and sometimes some financial investment to host. Can you talk a little bit about what that cost is and what the benefits are for those costs?
You want to go first, Mel?
Sure. I think my situation is a bit different because I'm also head of archives and special collections. So it allows us a lot more opportunities, I think, to show tangible physical things to people, which people are excited about. And then you can mirror them with the digital content on like a big screen. But as far as getting buy-in for paying for things, it really depends on what the event is. Most of the events that we do 2 exhibitions a year, one in the fall and one in the spring. Depending on what the show is, we will seek money a year ahead of time because we plan our shows 2 years ahead of time. We will start seeking those finances from different donors, depending on what collection we're highlighting. If we know it's something that advancement or foundation, depending on what you call it at your institution, is interested in, or it's one of their big donors, we involve them immediately because they will often pay for our big opening receptions or any private receptions they want to hold for donors in the space. So I think in many ways, because it is archives and specs, it's a little bit easier than if you're purely digital. But events are very expensive. So we budget not knowing whether we're going to get funding. We set aside $2,000 from our budget every year. And then we fundraise to try and make sure that we can at least like match that or surpass that. But at least we know we have that money going in. So it's really, for me, it's really about budgeting and budgeting years in advance to know that that money is secured so that I'm not making a promise to present something and then not able to facilitate it. But if I can fundraise for it and surpass it, then I know that that money just stays in my foundation account. So it's a little bit about juggling money because you don't know with donors when and if money is going to come in. And sometimes when money does come in from donors, right, it's very specific to where it can be spent. So that's another thing to manage. But we start promoting our exhibitions and hand, little mini descriptions of them out to Foundation 2 years ahead of time so that they could start pushing it toward donors to fund them.
And we don't normally do events, but when the 1 million download hit and we had a lot of momentum going and we wanted to continue that. And we had really, a lot of faculty had, kind of gone out of their comfort zone with us. And, a lot of folks, we really wanted to thank them for what they had done. And so we decided we were going to throw this party. The library gave us a small budget for food, which was fantastic. And we're very thrifty. We're a very party planning department. So we had a supply of some things. We have our Dollar Tree decorations and we did some printing and we had some things that we normally give out. We had some pins, we had some fans. So we were able to make some goodie bags with some things we had. And then we made a few things. We wanted shirts that all had our logo on them. So everybody bought their own white shirt and I did iron-on logos. So we printed and ironed them off. So, I mean, it was really a very grassroots event. We were able to pull off, something nice by just, rearranging the furniture, having a nice little spread and, just kind of pulling it together. But we felt it was very important to give back to everybody. And it really did serve to continue some of that buy-in, which was a really nice outcome.
Thank you. And Jamie is my co-moderator. She's on the implementation team for SSDN as well as the chair of our training working group. Jamie, do you have something to add?
Sure. No, I don't have something to add. I really want to rely on the expertise of our panelists today. I think they've done a fantastic job, and I really want to thank them for their time and their insight into really getting buy-in at their institutions. So I had a question because both Mel and Lee, you mentioned the importance of establishing partnerships, and really this is like relationship building. Mm-hmm. I have a question. I think it's two-part really. So first, what strategies did you use to identify who the key stakeholders are, like who you need to identify to get buy-in from in each of your kind of needs? And I'm sure it might depend really on the particular project. And then also, how did you approach these people? Because I think maybe the hardest part, at least in my opinion, the hardest part is starting the conversation. Really, how do you, especially if the person is very busy, how do you get on their radar and things like that? So I don't know if you have any of those strategies to share with the group today. Thanks.
You want to go first, please?
Okay. So yeah, it is a couple different pieces there. So for funding buy-in, we just sort of follow the hierarchy, and that's we had not been getting a lot of traction in trying to get funding support for a repository or for a position. So we created a scholarly communication task force to sort of get some of that information so that we could share it with administration beyond the library. And out of that, we got a position for scholarly communication librarian, and then we got some good support for going forward with the tech fee proposal. So that was really good, but that was more administrative hierarchy wise. We sort of followed that and we laid the groundwork. And got meetings, and then we started getting on calendars for faculty senate and different things like that. So from a funding perspective and that sort of thing, that's what we did. For getting buy-in from faculty and across campus, I had a list of people who had wanted to work with us for years. And so some of them I just started going back through. So a couple years ago, you reached out about this. And so I already had, a good little network of people. But I will say early on in doing some digital collection stuff, when I did not have any connections there, right? I just started looking at what faculty were doing across campus. And we have a great social studies education department, and they were doing some really good stuff. So I just started emailing. And I would just say, don't be afraid to hear no. Because if you don't do anything, it's a no. But so I sent a couple of emails, and this one professor responded back, and we started working together. And then for the next several years, I was one of his guest speakers for teaching with primary sources workshops for the Library of Congress. So I would just say, don't be afraid to reach out, get to know what your faculty or your community is doing and what their needs are, and then reach out to them and explain to them how you can help fill that need.
I would agree with everything Lee said. And I think that what's interesting is that I think that when you're talking about whether it be faculty or, a university type institution, or if you're talking about cultural heritage organizations, the answer is still the same. You have to show up. And so my first few years when I didn't even live in Florida. I'm from 3,000 miles away. So I think in my first 3 years, I probably went to 2 events every week throughout season. And it was really about them continuing to seeing me suiting up and showing up for them. And that I was going to be a part of their community. The university here is very new. We're going to celebrate 25 years next year. So not only did we have the issue of the fact that an academic was walking into a historical society or a local museum, but it was that the university in and of itself was very new. So it was about proving that I wanted to be part of the community and building those relationships. And I spent a lot of time doing things like assessing their collections and their preservation and giving them this is the basic stuff that you can do at the price point that you have. And that's how I slowly just kind of built a community of people. And then it just kind of flourished because word of mouth, when you're consistent and when you're honest, I think word of mouth really takes care of itself for you. And that faith was developed for the archives and special collections. And digital initiatives just kind of follows that. The IR was a bit trickier, but I think that, Lee really answered that. The answer is the same. You have to just reach out and not be afraid of people telling you no. You just have to forge the relationships. And once those relationships are in place and trust and faith is there, then there's nowhere up but to go,
The other thing I would say is, I've heard no from different people at different times. And then 2 years later, they come back, oh, I've got this project, or I get a random email out of the blue. So it might be no today, but don't feel bad. Just keep going. And sometimes you just let it lie and you never hear from them. But then, sometimes it just does take time. And when they're ready, they'll let you know.
So I know both of you have worked with community organizations to help get their content online or to assess their content. Do you have advice for people who are at small organizations? They might be loner rangers, or this is a very small portion of their job responsibilities in approaching a larger institution for a partnership or for assistance with digitization or hosting?
I think you just reach out, and that's one of the reasons I created that list. And that was just me kind of, brain dumping for 30 seconds, is that, none of us are in this for the big paycheck. We're in this because we're passionate about what we're doing. And so we all want to help each other. I don't think I've met anyone in Florida since I've been here that works in the kind of work that we do that doesn't want to collaborate, that isn't seeking it for themselves. And so if you just send that email, or if you just reach out, and once we get back to live conferences, talk to as many people as you possibly can. We all want to help. And that's one of the reasons too, that like I list my email, because I also know that, you know, when people listen to presentations like this, not everyone's comfortable asking a question, but afterward I'll often receive like, so how again did you do this? And then there's that, you know, that relationship is forged in that instant. It's just about talking to another person. And I mean, we all love what we do, or else we wouldn't continue doing it.
I agree. I would say sometimes we get very busy. So don't be discouraged if you are at a, you know, a small museum or a historical society and you reach out, just, you know, follow up with a phone call, send an email. But sometimes we get busy and we want to help. And I think that really is the basis of it. And sometimes it might not meet with the mission of our library or the institution, but I have yet to turn anybody away to give them advice, or to, you know, meet to share some expertise, or to, you know, direct them to someone else who could help them. So really, if somebody needs help, just reach out. And it could be that they, you know, reach out to me, but they're not in my area or a certain expertise. So I will suggest they talk to somebody else. So don't be afraid to reach out.
And we do have a question in the chat. I'm curious about how to show up in an environment where in-person isn't possible. I'm thinking back to my last role where the office was in 3 different cities and stakeholders were statewide. I guess there are events like this, but what else can I do to make connections over distance?
Well, I think you asked the right person, and she's moderating.
Yeah. I can't take this question.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of cold emailing of people. And I try to be a part of as many different kind of service opportunities as I can to make those connections, and to become familiar with what the landscape is, and who I can reach out to. And I'm also not afraid when I'm emailing people to say, if you're not the right person for this, can you point me in the right direction? Right. So instead of like losing hope there, and like, oh, I didn't get the right person, hopefully that person will be willing to point me in the right direction, and then I can start from there. I also, I think I have the luxury of having already had existing relationships when I started in my role. But this, we have this slide up because the SSDN is a great resource to get connected to people. So you can always email me. If you don't know where to start, you can email me if you have any questions, and I can point you in the right direction. I'm happy to help. I answer people's metadata questions all the time. People have questions about who they can connect to in their area, and I can point you in that direction. And if I don't know the answer to a question that you ask me, I will find somebody that does, and connect you with them, or ask them and forward the answer along to you. I'm also happy to sit on a call with you and answer questions or concerns that you have. So you can also start with me. I'm not saying like I'm the end all answer to that question, but I'm happy to connect you to other people. And SSDN is a broad network. We don't, You don't have to be a content contributor to be part of our network. Just attending a webinar like this, we consider you part of our network. So yeah, don't be afraid to email people. And as Mel and Lee both said, don't be afraid to hear no. Because, you know, someone might remember that you reached out to them and get back to you at a later time. So we have about 4 minutes. If anyone else has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I want to thank Lee and Mel again for their time sharing their experience and expertise. And before I had this role, I had the opportunity to connect with both of them at different points early on in my career, and they've been very, very helpful every time. So they're also great resources to reach out to.
I think we're very fortunate in Florida that we do have a good, strong community of people who, like Mel said, really care about what they're doing. And so pretty much if I have a digital commons thing, I reach out to Jamie and Jill at FIU because, you know, I know that they have probably dealt with it, or if not, they're going to deal with it, and we have a conversation. I don't talk to them every day or even every month, but we, you know, it's so nice to be able to have people across the state that will be able to help you with different aspects of what you're doing. So yeah, I think we're very fortunate here.
I would absolutely second that. And I would also say that one of the things that has been interesting is that, you know, many of us are in different types of repositories and different platforms, but the work that we do and that why we do what we do remains the same. And so that really connects us. And we just want to help others do that. So it doesn't matter, you know, what institution or whether it's a college or a university or historical society or what it is. It's really that why and answering that why for ourselves that we do every day when we suit up and show up for work. So we really just do want to help you. So reach out. And thank you guys for the time.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to all of our attendees. We will be sending out the recording after this. And please feel free to email us at SSDN or any of our presenters if you have additional questions. Thank you.